Welcome to That Time When. Matt Miller with you for Trek Zone. This is the podcast series where we take you through the archive and find some shows that you might have missed or not caught yet. Today we're flashing back a couple of years and it's a very happy birthday to the Australian Space Agency today. It's the podcast where Dr. Brad Tucker came on the show to tell us all about it.
Well, today I've discovered that Australia is getting a space program, but I also discovered that New Zealand has had one for a while. I'm going to have a guest in to talk about that right after this. Well, joining me from Canberra is Brad Tucker from the Australian National University. Brad, thanks so much for your time, man.
No worries, anytime. I love talking space.
Now, let's talk space because we're getting a space program according to the federal government. What does that mean to you?
So I think the official start date of the Space Agency is the 1st of July. And what it really is it's kind of it's a formation and putting under an umbrella stuff that's already been happening in Australia. Australia's been doing a lot of stuff. In fact, we actually just worked on a satellite that was launched a few weeks ago called the Grace Follow-On mission. And what has been missing is kind of a lack of coordination from groups. There's groups in ACT, Melbourne, South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory, all doing slightly different things. And the Space Agency hopefully brings them together, because when I say NASA, you think of one group, but actually NASA has 14 different centers across the US, plus different smaller hubs at universities, and they all work on different parts of big projects. So when you say NASA, it's actually this huge organization. So we have a lot of the parts already. It's trying to put that together so that we can do some of these big projects that we want to really do here, and also do them on the things that affect our everyday lives.
So what does that mean for someone like you? Because the last time that we spoke was the Canberra road trip a couple of years ago, and you were building satellites to launch into orbit.
That's right. And so, in fact, we've actually increased that. So we're actually building about 2 satellites a month at this rate already now. In fact, there's one that was just being tested and ready for launch in the next month. So there's this rapid movement where we are doing this almost mass production of satellites now. And in fact, as you mentioned with New Zealand, there's actually even collaboration between Australia and New Zealand now as part of this. And that's what the Space Agency will do. So what we're hoping to see is that now with both a centralized thing, because we actually have a problem where we need some bureaucracy. It's not often said that we need bureaucracy, but this is one of those times, because when let's say I want to launch something, well, the way stuff like space insurance is done, because that's a real thing, it has to be done through these special acts of parliament that justifies to a launch company in a different country. It's this very convoluted thing because there's no central point that you go to do activities. That's what the Space Agency will do, plus some money to do international projects. And one of the cool things in the budget that was announced was this $225 million to improve our GPS. And so this is something that's going to be done here with Geoscience Australia and us, and that we're going to improve GPS positioning from 5 meters to about 2 to 3 centimeters.
Wow.
So that's kind of like knowing whether you're at home to what part of what room you're in. And so the propagation, the effects on business will be tremendous on this kind of technology.
At this point, I know it's a little ways off, but are we going to start seeing Australian astronauts getting into space from Australian launch sites, do you reckon?
So I think it's a bit of a ways off. But I actually think potentially seeing Australian launch sites isn't as far as Australian astronauts. And that's because Australia has one great thing about it, and that is geography. We have lots of land, but we cover a lot of latitude east to west and longitude north to south. So places towards the northern part of Australia, you can put satellites around the equator. And because the climate is actually quite dry in most of those places, there's a few tropical places, but most areas are dry. If you look at all the other equatorial sites, they're Equatorial Guinea or Florida, they're rainforests that, you always hear of launch delays because of weather. Well, when you have a dry desert, that's a pretty good place to launch stuff. So you kind of have the thing that if you build it, people will come to launch stuff. So I think we will see that sooner rather than later, and the Northern Territory is planning this. But it's also, I think we can think that in the future, we could see Australian astronauts. We want to grow this. You don't start from day one putting people into space, but neither did NASA. So I think we want to focus on some products that return investment to the Space Agency and build it up that way.
I think it's a bit unfair that New Zealand had a space agency before us, but there you go. We're finally catching up and we're doing a lot of amazing stuff with the space sector. It's an area that the federal government is pouring a lot of money into, and it's fantastic to see companies like Fleet Space Australia, Southern Launch, and Gilmore Space as well really start up and really get going to provide Australia's sovereign launch capability. But it's not the only thing we're doing in the space sector. It's absolutely incredible what is happening, and TrekZone is your source of information for all of that. That's who we love to bring onto the show, Aussie companies getting started in the space industry. So be on the lookout for all of those. If you want to catch the interview in full, be sure to click on the card here on YouTube, or if you're listening to this as a podcast, jump on to TrekZone.org, scroll down to the That Time When section and click through to the full chat. Huge thanks to Dr. Brad Tucker. He comes by every Tuesday with the latest science and space news, and he's been doing that now for 129 episodes, which is just absolutely incredible. There's a card for Talking Science there as well on YouTube. Or as I said, TrekZone.org, scroll down to the Talking Science section. It's all there. For now though, I'm Matt Miller for TrekZone.
Keep up to date with Twitter. Catch new podcasts daily on YouTube. Plus, we're beaming to your favorite podcast app 5 days a week. Just search for TrekZone and subscribe.